The main character, Rose, feels anxious as she searches for her daughter. Meanwhile, her daughter Mason stands at the edge of a cliff, staring ahead with empty eyes. Below the cliff, a fiery world burns, flames raging. A child smiles at Mason, and just as she's about to jump, Rose arrives in time to stop her. After being saved, Mason groans in pain, muttering about a remote mountain which seems to be her real home. Rose's husband Jack also arrives, and they reveal that Mason is not their biological child. They adopted her from an orphanage. Rose realizes that whenever Mason sleepwalks, she mentions the remote mountain. To help Mason, Rose decides to visit that place. Without telling Jack, Rose takes Mason there. At a gas station, Rose notices Mason's strange, dark drawings. When she asks about them, Mason cries and says she doesn't know what's happening. Mason's crying catches the attention of a policewoman, Sane. A few days earlier, a man had thrown a boy into a coal mine vent, so Sane is cautious about adults traveling with children. While Rose is paying for gas, Sane talks to Mason asking if she needs help. Mason rolls up the car window, saying she doesn't talk to strangers. Sane praises her for being a good child. When Rose finishes paying, she finds her bank card frozen. She calls Jack, who tells her he froze the account after finding information on her computer about a ghost town in the area, which was destroyed by a fire years ago. He doesn't want her to take any risks, and he suggests taking Mason to a hospital instead. Rose, however, is determined. She sees Sane standing by the car, quickly ends the call, and drives off. Sane notices her license plate and follows. As Rose drives through the mountain roads, she hears a police siren behind her. She pulls over, and Sane steps out to check on her. While waiting, Rose sees a sign pointing to the remote mountain. Without hesitation, she tells Mason to fasten her seatbelt, steps on the gas, and speeds down the mountain path. She crashes through a metal gate without stopping, with Sane following closely behind. Suddenly, a sharp, screeching noise comes from the radio. Mason screams in pain, clutching her ears. Rose fumbles to turn off the radio, but at that moment, a shadowy figure appears in the middle of the road. Rose swerves to avoid it, but crashes into a guardrail. She loses consciousness. When Rose wakes up, everything is eerily silent. Snow covers the ground in a thick white blanket, but something feels wrong. Mason is nowhere to be seen. Panicked, Rose steps out of the car and calls for her daughter. She runs through the snow but finds no trace of Mason. Then a snowflake falls on her face. She brushes it off, realizing it isn't snow but ash from something that burned. She stumbles upon a sign that reads, "Welcome to the remote mountain." Rose enters a small, foggy town where visibility is low. She screams Mason's name and sees a shadowy figure of a girl in the distance. She chases after it. The figure leads her to a staircase. Before Rose can follow, she hears a police siren again. The sky darkens, and everything around her plunges into complete darkness. Rose lights her lighter, but discovers the staircase behind her is now blocked. The surroundings change into a dark, damp, rotting place with a foul stench. Suddenly, she hears heavy footsteps. Turning around, she sees a rusty metal bed with a body lying on it. Another body is suspended on a steel mesh, with its inside spilled onto the floor. Before Rose can process what she sees, a humanoid creature covered in ash emerges from the shadows. Terrified, she backs away, dropping her lighter. More creatures appear, surrounding her. Rose runs into a nearby room and slams the door shut. The creatures claw and pound on the door, but just as Rose thinks she's doomed, they suddenly crumble into ash and vanish. The eerie world shifts back to the misty town. Shaken, Rose runs toward what she thinks is an escape route, but finds herself standing at the edge of a massive cliff. The cliff appears to have been torn apart by some unnatural force. Out of nowhere, an old woman approaches Rose. The woman, who seems unhinged, mutters that the gate to the outside world is sealed by demons. Rose pulls out a photo of Mason, begging for help. The woman becomes hysterical, claiming Mason is her daughter. Alarmed, Rose runs back to her car, desperate to leave a message for her husband, Jack. She tries calling him, but the phone doesn't work. Leaving a voicemail, she expresses regret for coming to this place and for risking their daughter's life. However, when she tries to start the car, it refuses to work. At that moment, Sane arrives. She accuses Rose of harming Mason and handcuffs her. They walk back along the road, only to find Sane's police motorcycle abandoned nearby. Further along, they reach a dead end, as if the road itself vanishes into thin air. Meanwhile, Jack drives toward the mountain, but sees the road blocked by police. He spots Rose's car on the other side of the barrier. The sheriff offers to guide him to the mountain. When they reach the town, it looks entirely normal. There's no fog or ash, just an abandoned place. The sheriff reveals that a fire devastated this town 30 years ago, leaving many dead, injured, or missing without a trace. Rose and Sane cautiously move through the eerie town. They soon encounter a terrifying creature, a skeletal monster with no eyes, ears, or mouth, but its chest emits a foul, acidic substance. While Sane fights the creature, Rose takes the chance to flee. Sane defeats the monster but notices more of them emerging from the mountains. Rose follows the road signs to a school. Inside, she sees shadowy figures and hears unsettling noises. While searching for an escape, she stumbles into a classroom. Suddenly, a shadow passes by. It's the same one she chased earlier. She follows the shadow to a restroom, checking each stall but finding nothing. Instead, she discovers a corpse wrapped in barbed wire. Despite her fear, she notices an arrow drawn on the wall, pointing toward the corpse's mouth. Overcoming her disgust, Rose pulls out a piece of wood from the corpse's mouth. Before she can leave, the mysterious figures from earlier appear outside the restroom door. She hides, holding the door shut as they try to force it open. Suddenly, a bird in the figure's cage lets out a cry. The figures stop their attempts and leave. When Rose opens the door, they are gone. Before she can catch her breath, the world shifts again. The school becomes dark, with walls crumbling and coated in grotesque red slime. The corpse in the restroom comes to life, crawling on its hands while its head and feet remain bound. Terrified, Rose runs down the staircase, only to find more corpses hanging upside down. Swarms of massive insects crawl out of every corner. She also sees the three mysterious figures being consumed by the insects. Rose continues running and eventually sees a little girl drawing on a piece of paper. The girl glances at Rose before tilting her head. At that moment, a metal gate tears open and Rose falls through. Landing hard, she finds herself facing a three-headed monster holding a large knife. The creature's appearance is horrifying, with sharp teeth and ash-covered skin. Rose runs for her life as the monster chases her. Meanwhile, Jack reaches the same town, but it looks completely different from what Rose sees. He tries to track her using her perfume scent, but the sheriff insists it's all an illusion. Back in the alternate town, Rose collapses in tears. She doesn't understand why she's facing these horrifying events when all she wanted was to help her daughter. Her despair grows as she's surrounded by countless insects. A figure suddenly appears, pulling her into a room and shutting the door. It's Sane, who also ended up in this twisted world. As they block the door with a metal bar, a giant insect falls to the floor, revealing a human face. They have little time to react as the three-headed monster from earlier begins stabbing through the door with its knife. Insects swarm in through the cracks, and the monster tries to tear the door apart. Sane fires her gun, but it has no effect. As they lose hope, the insects and the monster suddenly turn to ash and disappear. The broken door and the world around them return to the eerie, fog-filled version of the town. Sane, shaken, screams to release her frustration, while Rose, having already experienced this cycle, remains silent. She examines the piece of wood she retrieved earlier and uses its clues to find a hidden hotel. Inside, she meets two women. One is the old lady she encountered earlier, and the other is a local named Hannah. Hannah explains that some people still live in this cursed place, scavenging for survival. Rose finds a painting in the hotel, which leads her to a concealed room behind a wall. Inside, she discovers a massive hole leading to another chamber. Rose carefully descends into the hidden chamber. The air grows colder, and strange whispers fill the space. At the bottom, she finds a large circular altar covered in symbols and ash. In the center lies an old leather-bound book. As Rose examines the book, she notices it's filled with symbols matching those on the altar. A drawing within shows a child surrounded by fire, with the words "sacrifice to end the curse." Confused and horrified, Rose takes the book and climbs back to the surface. Meanwhile, Jack, guided by Rose's perfume, arrives at the same hotel in his version of the town. However, he finds it abandoned. He notices faint footprints leading to the hidden chamber, but doesn't descend. Back with Rose, Sane and Hannah argue about the book. Sane insists it's too dangerous to meddle with, while Hannah believes it could hold the key to breaking the curse. During their argument, the old lady intervenes, revealing more about the town's tragic past. Years ago, a young girl named Alice was falsely accused of witchcraft. She was burned alive by the townsfolk, and her rage cursed the land, turning it into a prison for anyone who enters. The creatures Rose has encountered are manifestations of Alice's pain and hatred. Rose is shocked and realizes the little girl she saw earlier might be Alice. Determined to find the truth, she decides to follow the book's clues, despite Sane's warnings. The group splits up. Sane stays to guard the hotel, while Rose and Hannah head deeper into the cursed town. As they explore, Rose hears a faint voice calling her name. Following it, she finds a decrepit orphanage. Inside the orphanage, Rose finds drawings scattered everywhere. One depicts a woman holding a baby, surrounded by flames. Another shows a black bird with sharp claws, perched on a broken clock. Rose realizes the clock in the drawing matches one hanging in the orphanage. She adjusts the hands to match the time in the picture, and a hidden door creaks open. Behind it is a small room, lit by a single flickering candle. In the center is a wooden box. Rose opens it to find a locket containing a photo of a young Alice with her parents. She also finds a key and a note that reads, "Forgive and be free." As Rose clutches the locket, the world shifts again. The orphanage walls rot away, revealing dark, twisted roots and pulsating flesh. Shadows surround her, whispering unintelligibly. Hannah tries to pull Rose away, but Rose insists they must keep going. The key leads them to a church, where they find another altar similar to the one below the hotel. This altar, however, is stained with blood and surrounded by carvings of screaming faces. A monstrous figure, larger than anything Rose has seen, emerges from the shadows. It appears to be a fusion of several creatures, with multiple limbs and faces. The creature lunges at them. Hannah is knocked unconscious, leaving Rose to face it alone. As the monster advances, the locket around Rose's neck begins to glow. In desperation, Rose holds the locket high and screams Alice's name. The monster hesitates, its face is contorting as if in pain. The locket's glow intensifies, and the air around Rose crackles with energy. The monster recoils, its many faces twisting in agony. With a final scream, it collapses into a heap of writhing shadows. The shadows dissipate, leaving nothing but an eerie silence. Rose, breathing heavily, looks down at the locket. It has stopped glowing, but a sense of calm washes over her. The curse seems to have lifted, and the world around her starts to change. The bloodstains on the altar fade, and the twisted roots retract into the ground, leaving the church in its original state. Hannah slowly regains consciousness and stands beside Rose. She looks around in disbelief as the once ominous church now appears serene. The sky above is no longer dark but clear, and the oppressive air lifts. "We did it," Hannah whispers, her voice full of awe. Rose clutches the locket tightly, feeling a sense of peace she hasn't known in years. She looks toward the exit of the church, her mind racing with thoughts of her daughter. Could this really be the end of the curse? Was Alice finally free? As Rose exits the church, she sees Jack waiting at the town's edge, holding his phone. The two lock eyes, and for the first time, Rose feels a glimmer of hope. The ground beneath them is no longer cracked and burned. It's green again, the curse seemingly lifted. Jack approaches her, concern and relief in his eyes. "I was so worried," he says softly, wrapping his arms around her. "You're okay?" Rose nods, but her gaze shifts to the horizon, where the once eerie mountains now seem peaceful. "It's over," she whispers, "but I still have to find Mason." Suddenly, the locket in her hand grows warm, and the image inside shifts, showing a new face, Mason's. "Let's go home," Jack says, looking at her with newfound understanding. With the town behind them and the world beginning to heal, Rose knows that her journey is far from over. But for the first time, she believes there's hope for her family. She turns to Jack, and together, they drive toward the mountains, knowing that whatever comes next, they'll face it together. Rose finally found the little girl in the blue dress that she had been following for a long time. Now she could see her face clearly. To her surprise, the girl looked exactly like the ghost girl, Sun. They were like twins. Rose wanted to ask the girl about Sun's identity, but suddenly the girl spread her arms and her body caught fire before vanishing. After that, a flock of birds flew up into the sky. Hannah shouted, "The Demon King is here!" and told everyone to run. As they ran down the road, countless birds flew in one direction. Soon, the sound of an alarm echoed in the air. They arrived at a church where the alarm was coming from. At that moment, Jose was shocked to see that the church was exactly the same as the one his daughter had drawn in a painting. A group of people rushed out from the fog and ran into the church, panicking. But the crazy old woman pulled tightly on the pin and warned them not to trust the people inside. Just then, a dark shadow began to approach, and the floor started to crack. It lifted up into the sky. Rose and Sane had no choice but to run inside. The crazy old woman raised her hand, and a three-headed monster appeared behind Hannah. Rose and Sane heard a loud scream as the monster lifted Hannah and ripped her apart. Rose and Sane rushed into the church, guided by the leader, Bila. Everyone began praying as the darkness was held back outside the church. After running out of the mountains, they felt something strange about the sheriff. They sneaked into the police data room and found a photo in a file about the Quiet Mountain. To their surprise, it looked exactly like the ghost girl from the mountain. The sheriff then went to the orphanage where he had once adopted a girl and asked about her background. He showed the picture to the priest, but the priest remained vague and refused to talk. At that moment, the sheriff arrested him for trespassing, handcuffed him, and told him that the girl in the picture had been mistreated and died in a fire on the Quiet Mountain. He advised the priest to go home immediately. Later, Rose asked Bella about the whereabouts of her daughter. Bella replied that only the devil knew where she was. To find her, Rose had to go to the devil's domain. Rose agreed to go, even though Sane tried to persuade her not to. Jose said he would go to hell for his daughter. Sane responded with a famous line, "A mother is a god in the eyes of her children." They were then taken to a hospital where the devil resided deep inside, in room B151. As they prepared to enter the elevator, B accidentally saw a photo of Mason who looked exactly like the woman and ordered his subordinates to capture them. Under B's orders, Rose was able to enter the elevator, but Sane was caught and severely beaten. After reaching the deepest part of the building, Rose followed the map to room B151, but in the hallway, she encountered a group of headless creatures dressed as nurses. They didn't move until Rose shone her flashlight on them. When she turned it off, they froze again. With great courage, Rose stepped past them, using the flashlight to lure them away. Inside the room, there was a bright light, and Rose covered her eyes. A voice then explained the full story. 30 years ago, a girl named Ada was born into a single-parent family. Because she had no father, her classmates teased her, calling her a witch. One day, Ada encountered a perverted janitor in the restroom. Her mother, Dahlia, found her and tried to protect her. However, Ada's tragic story was just beginning. In those days, single mothers were considered criminals, and their children were seen as monsters. The religious leader, Bila, promised to cleanse Ada's body and soul, so Dahlia handed Ada over to him. They took her to room 111 in a hotel where they tried to burn her alive. However, an accident caused the chains to snap and a fire broke out, burning everyone but one officer, the sheriff, who managed to save Ada. The sheriff, who survived the fire, took Ada to a hospital, but she was left alone, feeling desperate and afraid. Over time, these feelings turned into hatred. She began to despise everyone, including the nurse who had glanced at her. This hatred grew each day, and Ada used her powers to create a dark world where only she could live, trapping the others inside. The people who survived the fire were also taken into this world, where they couldn't live anymore. In this world, only Ada could grow, and everyone's appearance remained frozen in time. Rose, now in the dark world, asked Ada about the whereabouts of her daughter. Ada, now dark and twisted, told Rose that Masun was actually a bit of kindness that the girl had turned into. Through Ada's dark power, Masun had been brought to the orphanage. Ada then asked for their help. Despite the dark world Ada created, there was a church with divine light that she could not enter, but Rose could. Ada told Rose that Mason had been captured by Bila and would be burned alive if not rescued. Rose, without hesitation, agreed to save her daughter.